Chapter 10. Preparations for the battle. Bard paused as he noted Holger's approach. He was atop one of the walls, and he stared out into the distance. Bard had set up a few sunstones out there since it was outside of Holger's control, and it showcased the numerous shades that swarmed about. Nighttime was becoming ever more hostile, and it made Bard's stomach churn. He wasn't sure if even he and Sen would be able to leave the area safely now. Their numbers grew. It was today that he hoped Holger would show himself, and see for himself both the effect of the sunstones, and the strength and number of the shades. Holger whistled, and a man came over, dodging in the firelight to avoid any unwanted attention from the shades. Bard waited courteously. "Our chief would like to strike a bargain. He requests your presence," the man said. Bard noted his hobble. "Have Elvira check on you. He can see me. I'll leave now so you don't have to report," Bard said kindly. The man smiled in relief and headed inside while Bard walked towards the entrance. He carried one of the sunstones with him, and didn't have to keep to the light sources as much. It was all according to plan. Now it was up to him to do this negotiation. Holger removed himself from the top of the wall, his eyes having been riveted to Bard moments before. Bard rounded the entrance and Holger approached. "How many of those sunstones do you have?" Holger asked. Bard felt this was rather direct, even for Holger. Perhaps the sight of the shades was enough for a more direct approach. "I'm not sure. I could find out. A rough estimate will do," Holger said, a bit impatient. Bard paused. He pretended to think about it for a bit. He knew they had enough for the whole village, but he needed Holger to question him a bit more and negotiate. About 50. "I think," Bard answered. "Only 50, a man above said." Bard knew that number would be insufficient. Holger glared up above and the head slunk back from the edge. 50. "What about the ones out on the field?" "Oh, that's including them, though. I do have a few personal ones." Holger sighed as Bard placed his hand to his chin. "Would be willing to part with those personal ones?" Holger asked. Bard smiled. "A merchant would be loath to do such a thing. They are my safeguard. But perhaps I can negotiate with Ruger and scrounge up some more, seeing the situation we are in," Bard said, and Holger's breath appeared on the cold air. "That would be appreciated, though. I do hope to cooperate in this. I'll offer a steep discount this time since we might not survive otherwise. In exchange, can you have me and my wife set them up to maximize coverage?" Holger's eyes narrowed. "Of course. We would need you and your men to help," Bard said, to sweeten the idea. He apologized in his mind to Sen. She might be working with Holger during most of this. He only prayed the fool of a chief had enough decency to focus a bit more on work. "That would be acceptable," Holger said, and Bard grinned. "Pleasure doing business with you. I'll gather what I can and give you the final count and the total tomorrow." Holger left as Bard bowed, and then Bard moved back to Ruger's yard. He sighed in exhaustion when he got inside. Being a merchant and not sewing your thoughts on your face was hardly enjoyable. Sen approached him, and he slumped his shoulders as she came close. "Anne?" she asked. He tipped his head confused, then thought perhaps she had watched him leave, and then return. "Holger wants to buy all the sunstones we can gather. He also will allow us to place them strategically on the basis we have him and his men help." "I'm sorry, Sen. He's likely to want you to work with him." Bard watched the range of emotions from her. At first, her elation, and then her concern, and finally her anger. "Really? You accepted that? I would rather a quick negotiation. I'll make it up to you somehow." "Bard promised you better," she grumbled, and then tipped her head down and placed her crown against his stomach. "I'm glad it worked out," she said softly. Bard placed his arms around her in a gentle hug as Elvira walked in. "So?" she asked, and Bard wondered how many had watched him. He nodded, and Elvira sighed in relief before fetching Ruger. The four sat around the table, some more bleary-eyed than others. They confirmed numbers, and in total they had over 180 sunstones that emitted light, and another 40 that emitted heat. Ruger wouldn't part with some of his as he was anticipating the after effects of the war. They began to formulate locations and where to place children and individuals who they needed to protect. The discussion stopped when both Ruger and Sen's eyes struggled to stay open. Morning came a bit too quickly, and Bard negotiated with Holger, and they began to collect the sunstones out in the fields and from Ruger's stash. Holger was surprised they had that many, but the relieved looks on his men's faces kept him from making any untoward comments about the estimate last night. The price was very cheap, Even Ruger was aghast when he heard the final number. Elvira commented that he wouldn't make a good merchant with those numbers, but Bard's comment about it saving their lives made them smile. Holger would feel he had won, knowing the price Bard asked for earlier in his remarks to Sen about offering them too low. Meanwhile, Bard felt he had won. He didn't have a lot of coin he had to carry for their journey, and yet he had some for when he met the caravans in the coming seasons. He still hoped to buy long-lasting sunstones from them. Over the coming days, they worked with Holger and his men to install the sunstones around the village. Sen's nightly complaints about Holger's approaches were amusing, while filling Bard with a bit of anger at his persistence. The man had a loose moral code. In total, it took them 7 days to prepare. By that point, the shades had closed in, and only daytime travel was possible between Ruger's yard and the village. Unless you carried 4 sunstones, the fires were kept burning to have the sunstones off as much as possible, to store as much light as they could. Once the fighting began, they wouldn't be able to tend to them.